So, what happened in this episode? Well, we find out that Sunnydale has an annual volunteer safety program for Halloween. We also find out, being that this is the first, sort of Halloween episode of Buffy, that it's sort of a slow holiday for the Slayer. Apparently the monsters don't really like to come out on Halloween. It's just too commercial, and they're over it. Larry thinks Buffy is hot, and Larry is another character that we see here at Sunnydale High School, and we are going to see him again. So, Cordelia's dating Devin. So much for Jonathan. Again, Cordelia's, I guess, back to Devin. This is clearly, Cordelia's dating life is much more adventurous, I think, than mine has ever been. So, she's back to Devin. Larry thinks Buffy's hot, but he also kind of thinks she's easy, which probably says more about Larry than it says about Buffy. Buffy and Angel's first date was canceled due to slayage and Cordelia, sort of. Coca-Cola seems to have bought Sunnydale High School's beverage rights. Giles apparently likes cross-referencing. What do you get for the librarian that has everything? Something for cross-referencing. Spike is back and making trouble. Cordelia doesn't know that Angel's a vampire, so we have settled that question. Cordelia clearly doesn't know. And seems to have a crush on him. Giles knows Ethan, although we don't know where from. But that's kind of a scary idea. And Ethan survived and got away. So, some thoughts on this episode. Competition. Buffy and Angel are finally getting to the dating, but as they knew would happen, supernatural elements are getting in the way. So Buffy's late and dirty because of a little fight she had with a vampire. And she shows up and finds Angel talking to Cordelia, which is surely not, out of all the people in the world, right? And Cordelia seems to be stepping up her game. She's going for Angel a little more aggressively than she has in the past. And she sits with him at a table, despite the fact that he tells her that he's waiting for Buffy, and buys him a cappuccino. As far as dates go, she's being a little more aggressive. And she later tells Buffy to be afraid of her. Okay, she's clearly being more aggressive, but maybe from Angel's perspective it's a little more subtle than from Buffy's. But she tells Buffy that she is the dating slayer. So Cordelia seems to realize, though, at the end of this episode, hopefully, it sort of seems like she's realizing it, that Angel likes Buffy and Buffy likes Angel, and her attempts to get in between them are not going to be all that effective. So sometimes there are obstacles in dating. For Angel and Cordelia, maybe it's Buffy, and for Buffy and Angel, maybe it's slaying or their personal identities. And for, from the other side of the Cordelia and Angel, maybe it's Cordelia. Maybe Angel's just not interested in Cordelia, and that's totally valid. So when are the obstacles for dating too big? I think we've talked a lot about that kind of thing, but sometimes the obstacles are too big. As those of us who have dated and come up against some of those obstacles could probably tell you. And I think especially young in your dating career, you want to believe that you can overcome absolutely all of them, and that love withstands everything. But, I'm going to say, because I don't think this really comes up, in the show, like long distance. Long distance relationships are hard and they don't work for everybody, and they do work for some people, and part of figuring out ourselves and our lives is sometimes figuring out whether they work for us. That's not what's going on with Buffy and Angel, but sometimes, since none of us are going to be dating a vampire unless I'm totally wrong about them being imaginary, we have to try and extrapolate what the metaphor is for us. So, yeah. So, Ripper? What is up with Giles and Ethan? They know each other, which alone is weird. But Ethan calls Giles Ripper. Like, what is that? Giles, when he interacts with Ethan, becomes darker. Like, this is not the Giles that we know, that our gang just jokes about being, like, very uptight. But Giles seems to have been hiding this part of himself that is not the Giles that we have seen, really. He beats the crap out of Ethan, and he tortures him until he gives up the secret. And we could say that perhaps the ends justified the means, but dang, you know? Who is Giles? Like, what is going on? What do you think? What do you think this is about? Is it like, was Ethan a watcher? How do they know each other? What is going on? Buffy learns in this episode that it's not a good idea to dwell on past relationships of a partner. People move on from relationships for good reasons and are attracted to a variety of different things. So just because we are not like physically or emotionally or any other way an ex doesn't mean we don't, that we are not fulfilling our partner. I don't know about you, but I find a variety of different physical appearances attractive. And so I would hope that anybody that I would be in a relationship would never be thinking, oh, I should be blonde, or I should have brown eyes, or I should, because they see a picture of a particular ex, because we are all diverse and we all have different pieces of ourselves and are attracted to a variety of different things. So comparing ourselves to exes, while it can be a little bit tempting sometimes, especially if you maybe see that person a lot or they're in your life somehow, but we need to remember there's a reason that people end relationships, and generally speaking, the reasons for ending relationships are usually pretty good. Trying to mimic other women in Angel's life is ultimately unhelpful for Buffy, and she realizes that by the end of the episode. Have you ever been jealous or unfairly comparing yourself to someone? I think it's common for us to do that. Perhaps especially when we share something in common with that person. We learn that Giles has a strange past that we don't understand. What does this mean about Giles and who he is? I find it interesting also that Cordelia continues to pursue Angel. She's been interested since the first moment she saw him, so it's not like this came out of nowhere, right? Cordelia's been interested in Angel since episode 1 of Buffy. But despite however many guys Cordelia dates, because clearly Cordelia has a dating life, it's not like she's lonely in that respect, and the obvious developing relationship between Buffy and Angel, despite the reality that Cordelia can have plenty of guys, despite the reality that Angel seems interested in Buffy, she's still trying to win him over. Cordelia doesn't seem to value too many men in her life. It doesn't seem like she's really upset whenever she has a relationship problem, and she doesn't seem heartbroken for a million years after breaking up with someone, because she'll be with someone else in the next episode. So I wonder what's there. I wonder what it is about Angel that Cordelia's really drawn to, and if there's, what is her obsession with Angel? Do you think she's just trying to make Buffy jealous? Or do you think she really likes Angel? Much of this episode is about authenticity. It can be really easy to try to be someone else. Not to actually be them, but it can be easy to fall into a behavior of trying to mimic other people and become like someone that we admire in some way or think that we should be more like. Buffy in this episode is trying to do that. It can also be tempting to hide behind ourselves, the way that Willow is in this episode. The most important thing is to be who we are. We see that, like Janus, the dual nature, we have dual natures of our characters. And I think that is part of why we're seeing this two-faced God in this episode, is to emphasize the two reality, the two people that our characters are throughout the course of this episode, at least those who bought their costumes from Ethan. It's interesting that Cordelia is the one who didn't, because Cordelia, while, whatever we may think about Cordelia as a character and her maturity as a person, Cordelia is perhaps one of the best aligned characters in this show in some ways, because she is who she is. And I think that's why we didn't see Cordelia become someone else. Cordelia is authentic in ways that our other characters aren't. And she, we've seen in other episodes, like Out of Mind, Out of Sight, how Cordelia maybe sometimes hides who she is in some ways. For the most part, Cordelia is probably the most honest and the most authentic of our group. She doesn't feel like she needs to put on airs for anybody. And so it's interesting that she doesn't become another Halloween character. She doesn't become her cat costume. And clearly, for the plot, there's a reason for that, because she didn't buy her costume from that particular costume shop. But I think there's a reason that the writers didn't entertain that storyline of Cordelia turning into some other character that she wants to be or whatever, because Cordelia is happy with herself. But I think, like Janus, each of us and each of our characters, for the most part, have these kind of dual sides of themselves. Is Willow sexy, or is she shy? Is Giles proper, or is he dangerous? What does femininity mean for Buffy? Is it strength, or is it hair and dresses? What does it mean to be feminine? Is Cordelia self-centered or selfless? Is Xander brave or kind of useless? And I think the answer to all of these questions is both. All of us are complex and have different sides of our personalities. It's when we can see people and appreciate both sides, as Angel does with Buffy, that we can be ourselves and be happy. While Buffy is able to sort of achieve this by the end of the episode, some of our other characters kind of have question marks. Like, what about Cordelia? is she a mean girl or is she a nice girl? She sort of straddles that line and is pretty upfront about both.